You're welcome to today's tutorial. Now in this video, I'm going to be showing us how to create a perfect placket opening on your shirt or your senator top. So I have this piece of fabric and the length of this measures 9 inches and the width of this measures 6 inches. Okay, so all I did was like fold it right sides facing each other so that I can get a crease line on the center, and then I folded in half of an inch on both sides. Okay, and then I also added paper stay on this to give it some stability. Now the first thing I'm going to do is get my front fabric. This is the right side of my fabric. I'm going to measure out the length of the opening I want, which is 5 inches, and then I'm going to be marking this 5 inches on my placket. So actually I should have measured out 5.5 inches because I started to stitch this placket half of an inch above my actual fabric. So um, I'm taking in half of an inch on both sides, the left and the right, marking half of an inch. And then at the top as well, I'm also going to repeat the same process of marking half of an inch. Later on into the video, you find out why we are doing this. So I'm going to connect the lines from the top half of an inch to the bottom half of an inch, just like I'm doing. So if you notice, I'm making use of a pen. I also advise that you make use of a pen, because if you use a chalk, you end up getting very bulky lines. Okay, and it will be more than half of an inch, so we're trying to get half of an inch. And then I'm just going to square this at the bottom here. So I have my front fabric here, and this is what I've done. One other thing to do is at this point I'm just going to be going up by half of an inch at the center line, at the center crease line, and then I'll be connecting it diagonally to the left and to the right. So you just repeat the same process as I'm doing. And then we have that sorted out. So I'm going to be placing this placket about half of an inch above my actual fabric. So that's why I said you should just add half of an inch to the depth of what you're measuring. And this placket is being placed right side of the placket on the wrong side of my front fabric, right side to the wrong side of my front fabric. So I'll take this to the sewing machine and run a stitch all the way from the top to the bottom, from left to right, and all the way back up. So I'll do that right away on my sewing machine. So I'm here on my sewing machine, and then you just want to make sure that you don't have any other fabric underneath. Right side facing the wrong side of your shirt fabric, and then we'll just proceed to stitching both pieces together. So of course, with a back stitch, lift up your footer here. Make sure you don't exceed that 5-inch depth that you came down by. Lift up my footer, turn, and then I'll begin to stitch all the way to the top. And then when I get here, I'll run a back stitch, and then we're done with that. So now I'm just going to cut through, okay, the center all the way to the end. And please make sure that when you're cutting through, you do not cut through the seam. Please don't cut through the seam, otherwise you'd have to restitch that. And then I'm also going to be cutting diagonally as I drew out. And make sure you cut as close to the seam as possible, but do not cut through it. So I'm cutting this to the left, and I'm also going to be cutting this to the right. Now once we've achieved this, I'm now just going to be flipping this. So this is how it should look like. This is what you should have. I'm now going to be turning this over to the right side of my fabric. So this time around now, the wrong side of the placket is going to be facing the right side of my fabric. I'm just going to give this a good press so that it stays down in place properly. And then after giving this a press, it's looking neat. And then please note that the seam should be facing towards the placket, inside the placket. And then now I'm just going to cover this up. So what I'm trying to do is cover up the seam that we have as closely as possible. So as closely as possible. And then I'm going to be marking at that 5-inch stitch line, because when I'm stitching, that's where I'm going to stop. So I must not exceed, or you must not exceed that stitch line, your initial stitch line of 5 inches. So I'll just take this to my sewing machine right away, and then I'll run a stitch from the top here all the way to that 5 inches mark that I have at the bottom. So I'm running a back stitch and I won't exceed that, and then I'll also repeat the same process on the right side of my placket. So make sure the seam is facing towards the placket, indicate where you have to stop, fold your placket as close to the original stitch line as possible, and then you run a stitch very close to the edge of your placket. And if you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And if there are other tutorials you'd want for me to put up, please don't hesitate to leave that your comments in the comments box. Thank you. So I'm just running this stitch all the way down to the 5 inches mark that I indicated on. And then at this point now, after running that stitch, just decide how or where you want your placket to face. So for me, I think I'm going to be going with this. So I do hope that this placket is visible. This is actually my client's school uniform. So I couldn't use a different fabric for the placket. So now at the bottom of the placket, I'm just going to cut through here the center of this. Okay, just cut through, but don't go all the way to the top. Just cut through so that your placket can be in two. Okay, so you would have like one piece of fabric on top, and then the other piece of fabric for the placket at the bottom. So holding them down with pins, just arranging them so that it's not moving out of place. Okay, so now we have two pieces of plackets here. Now this one at the bottom, I'm going to be trimming this off because I can't sew both of them together. It will be very bulky. So I'm going to be trimming it off and leaving about half of an inch at the bottom. So this is just fine. This will work. And then now with the remaining, I'm just going to measure out the length of the placket I want to show on the outside. Okay, so this is about 8.5 inches. I want about 7.5 inches. So the excess I'm going to have to fold. So you can fold and hold this down with a pin, or you can fold and iron it out so that it lays in place. I actually had mine ironed out, and this is what it looks. And then I'm just going to make sure that it's in place and is sitting on the crease line, like on the center crease line of this front piece of fabric. And then if you can't get it, just make use of your pins to hold it down in place. In sewing, I cannot overemphasize the usefulness of holding down your fabrics with pins. So now I'm going to go up about a quarter of an inch above this mark I made, and run a stitch all the way down, left and right, and then up. I will also stop about half a quarter of an inch and run a straight stitch at the top. So in essence, you're just trying to create a box effect. So you're just trying to create a box effect or a design effect to hold down this remaining side of the placket to your main fabric. So all the way down, running my stitch, I'm going to lift my footer, flip my fabric over, and then if there are any loose ends, just tuck it inside with your pin, and then I'll begin to stitch all the way to the top. And at that mark, I'm going to go in, I'm going to come up a quarter of an inch, just a quarter of an inch. So at this point, I shouldn't have lifted my foot. I should have just, taken the stitch all the way from the left to the right. So that's what I'm doing here actually. I'm just running another stitch here. Okay, and then that's it for creating our plackets. I'm just going to take out the pin so that I can open this up for you to view. It's actually very easy. So this is what it looks like. Very neat and very, very easy. So you can attach your press buttons here or your hook and eye or whatever. And then at the back, this is what it looks like. So I hope you found this tutorial very useful. Please do well to try this out and let me know. Till my next video, bye and stay blessed.